בוקר טוב, 6/6/26, איזה תאריך. אמ, אצלי כבר יצאה השבת, אז למישהו מודאג. החלטתי שיש איזה וידאו מעניין שנותן חומר, עוד חומר לכל מה שאני כבר הרבה זמן מדברת, פשוט הפעם אנה הביאה דברים שמדובר קצת על ישראל, על הסיפור עם טראמפ. ולכן חשוב לי, אני לא ארבה בזה, כי דיברתי על זה המון, ו... ואת הקטע הזה שטראמפ מייצג תאגיד בריטי, ולא רק מייצג תאגיד בריטי, הוא גם מתנהל בהתאם. אז כל מפגש שנעשה עם ישראל זה עסקה של שני תאגידים. עכשיו, מה שקורה משום הסיבה שאף אחד לא בא לקחת את ישראל, אז שני התאגידים האלה, כאילו ישראל וארצות הברית, חוברים יחד, אבל התרגיל הנוסף שהם עושים, זה שהם מכניסים את יוון. יוון מזמן פשטה את הרגל, אתם יודעים שיש לה חובות עצומים, אחר כך הם אמרו לא, אין להם, הגרמנים חייבים, היה משחק, אבל ביום שאני נחתתי ב-22 בקפריסין, קפריסין היוונית, ראיתי מי בדיוק שם מתנהל. אני אומרת לה, מה שנקרא, לישות היוונית, הישות המתה. היה לי שיחה איתו, כי הם דרשו ממני כמובן את הבדיקה או מה שלא יהיה, שהתנגדתי. ואני אומרת לו, הייתי יכולה לנהל איתך שיחה הרבה יותר נחמדה ולבוא ולשהות הרבה יותר בקפריסין. אבל כשאני רואה שמאחוריך עומדים שניים, שלא הייתי רוצה להיות במקומך, וזה שני נאצים. אז אני יודעת שקשה לך גם להגיב לכל מה שאני אומרת. וככה היה. אני כל כך קלטתי אותם, את אלה שעמדו מאחוריו, עם נשק, והוא כאילו היווני שעושה את העבודה עבור אותם ממש נאצים, זה נאטו, ששולטים בקפריסין, ביוון, תקראו להם, זה לא משנה אם אתם קוראים לזה UN, כי UN הוא תאגיד, אז זה שיתוף פעולה מושלם יחד עם נאט"ו, כל מה שמתחולל, כאשר הם באים לעשות גם, ואיך הישראלים עם הקטע האווירי והצבא, שיתוף פעולה עם יוון, וואו, איזה יופי. זה ייחוד לסדר עולמי, כאשר יהיה צבא אחד, לכן צריך להשמיד את הצבאות האחרים. אז קודם כל ישראל צריכה לגמור את העבודה שלה עם איראן. חיילים קיבלו הוראות מאז ומתמיד. יש פה מלחמה, תצאו למלחמה הזאת, תצאו. זה מנכ"ל של תאגיד שנותן את ההוראות לצאת למלחמה. ואז אותו מנכ"ל משתמש באנשים שלא מבינים את החוקים כשכירי חרב זולים. הוא לא צריך לשלם להם כלום. הוא נותן להם את הקבורה גם בחינם. כאילו, מה, כאילו, כמה ייקח זמן להתעורר? כמה אני זה כבר... כל הודעה שאני רואה של משרד הביטחון, ואת השקרים, ואת האנשים שמסביב שנפגשים ומנהלים את השיחות, פשוט מטורף. זה לא נקלט. ו... והאמת, הם פשוט גרמו נזק אדיר בהזרקות, שאנשים אפילו לא מסוגלים, אין להם כבר רגש, אין להם, הם לא רואים הם לא רואים את מה שקורה. אז היום, למרות שאני מאוד מאוד עייפה, היו לי כמה שבועות אינטנסיביים של בלי סוף של עבודה, ולכן אני אעביר את זה ישר לאנה, זה משהו, יש לה תמיד המון דברים מעניינים, אבל זה חלק מאוד מעניין. אז דקה, איפה זה? כן. אני לא שמה את זה ישר מההתחלה, אני מניחה את זה כאן.
Over the last couple of weeks is that this was all chosen. The dystopian nightmare that we've been living through, the dependence on so-called fossil fuels, the doctrine of scarcity, like the doctrine of discovery, was all promoted and pushed upon us by church and synagogue and mosque and temple leaders. And 200 of these supposed traditional and national religious leaders were in fact the fallen angels. And they were masquerading as religious leaders and pretending to have the highest moral authority. So these are situations that I guess they make sense if you think of it in terms of substituting yourself for someone or something else. Because here are these fallen angels pretending to be our religious leaders and to have the highest lawful authority when in fact they had no authority to speak for anyone at all. And we're certainly only promoting and continuing evils which are extremely ancient and well known. So in Astana, the capital of Kazakhstan, there is a building that is called the Peace Palace, and it's a pyramid. And it's a structure that was built as a model of a pyramidal structure that was destroyed during the Great Flood. And in that building was a hall that seated 200 exactly. And this was for a congress, they called it a congress of these 200 religious leaders that were in fact all found to be fallen angels. And this is really the big breakthrough that allowed us to identify the offices and those occupying those offices and hunt them down with great accuracy. And what was the real linchpin, I guess you could say, in the removal. They gave away their own hand. And so this is what finally allowed us to locate them, identify them exactly, and be sure that we had the right individuals in custody. Now, you can imagine the disruption that happens when the leaders of an entire transnational, worldwide crime syndicate are all either captured or placed under surveillance, 24-hour surveillance. It becomes impossible for the current system to continue for lack of leadership. It becomes impossible for all of these very 19th century or even 18th century models of economics and finance and commerce and everything else to continue in the face of all of the new and old technology that was progressed coming forward. Now, the danger that we face is being tricked by these tricksters again. And we have reason to think that despite many of the good things that are coming out of the Trump administration, nonetheless, the corporation that Mr. Trump is president of is a British territorial corporation. And the affiliations with the government of Israel, which is a commercial government like all the others, again, is a big red flag. You will see that the media magics are touting everything that Trump is doing in the Middle East, which essentially means forming a coalition of Arab nations against Iran, is really just all these corporations that have been masquerading as governments in those countries and which have all been controlled by Britain, getting together under Mr. Trump's auspices to bring pressure on Iran. And the other thing that Mr. Trump has managed to do is to coerce China, which is suffering horribly, to support him in the attack against Iran. The only one of Iran's allies that has stood firm with Iran is Russia. China was coerced because of dire economic and social and natural resource issues to forsake Iran. So that means that what Trump has done, although it's being touted as something against the old British Empire, is actually to do exactly what the old British Empire wanted done. And he's just simply trying to make it look like it's coming forward under American auspices instead of British auspices. And as he is the president of a British territorial corporation, it is actually under British auspices. And as always, they're trying to confuse their United States of America with our United States of America, and are using all of these semantic deceits to confuse Americans and other people throughout the world regarding who's doing what and why. And it's essential for us to keep our eyes on the ball and get the news out there so that people realize that no, Donald Trump is not America. Donald Trump is not even the United States of America that you all think of. Donald Trump is the president of a British territorial corporation calling itself the United States of America. Okay? And what he's done in the Mideast, by what I just described to you, is to bring a coalition of commercial corporations that are functioning as governments together to pick on a nation that is a sovereign nation and that they have no right to pick on at all. This is an illegal mercenary attack by corporations that are merely functioning as governments without really truly being governments. So these are issues of law and legality that have been, people haven't realized what was going on, so they couldn't take action about it, right? And so we're now against the wall here, seeing Donald Trump get away with all of this and trying to sound righteous about it and, blaming the Brits while working for the Brits. And so what does this tell us? It tells us that we're in the middle of a good cop, bad cop scenario where they're using our manpower, equipment that we paid for the benefit of their commercial corporation, and they're pretending to be us, and they're abusing our Title IV wartime flag to carry out this attack against Iran. They're trying to make it look like they're supporting national governments and the sovereignty of individual countries, while they're doing the exact opposite. They're just bringing these British territorial corporations that have been operating as governments together to gang up on an actual sovereign nation. And so this is just more dirty dealing by the Brits. And Donald Trump is a Brit. He is working for the Brits. He's working for the United States of America Incorporated, not the United States of America we all think about and assume.
טראמפ עובד עבור מה שנקרא, כשהיא אומרת United States Incorporated, כי לא היה כתוב את זה בעברית, זה תאגיד ארצות הברית ולא הארצות הברית האמיתית.
So, I'm sorry for all you MAGA supporters out there and everybody that thinks that this is all just brilliant, and I'm sorry for the ladies at Promethean Action, which, they talk a good line, and I have to assume that they're innocent of the kind of guile and deceit that this actually involves. But at the same time, it is a wolf in sheep's clothing scenario when you have a British territorial corporation president accusing the British government of wrongdoing and accusing the British government of fraud and various other crimes, but actually carrying out the will of that same British government. And so just because they say that they are supporting national governments, with these folks, you have to stop and ask, well, what do they mean by national? And what do they mean by government? You see, they are so completely deceptive, twisted, evil in their mindset and in their practices that nothing they say can be trusted at face value. Nothing. And so they're going out there and saying, yes, we're respecting the rights of the nations and we're respecting the rights of the people. But are they? Are they really? And where's the proof of that? And why are they attacking Iran, really? Okay, a lot of the diatribe about Iran, it doesn't make sense any more than the weapons of mass destruction that were the excuse for Iraq's, for invading Iraq. It makes no sense. There's nothing that's coming out of this clean. It's possible that President Trump had a valid good reason to attack Iran, just like it's possible for it to snow in June in Alaska. Okay, it's possible. But there's no proof there. There's nothing that's solid. There's nothing that really pencils out and makes sense. There's no 2 + 2 = 4 to Trump just out of the blue, taking a sidebar job and going over there and attacking Iran in our name and then pretending it had something to do with defending our country. It doesn't. There's nothing there. There's nothing substantive proving that Iran was any threat to us or even to Israel, really, because the real threat in the entire region was Britain. It was Britain that created the Muslim Brotherhood. And from the Muslim Brotherhood derived all of these different terrorist organizations that we all know and don't love. Hamas, ISIS, all the quote-unquote Jordanian freedom fighters, all of this was engineered by Britain. And since the early 1900s, Britain has been in charge of the Iranian government. So what, we have a British sea captain, a commander-in-chief, and you guys who've been in the military know that a commander is a naval office. It is not a land office, okay? So they've got a British territorial ship's captain, a commander-in-chief, who is attacking the sovereign government of Iran, and we still don't have any plausible reason for why he's doing this. It's just more hand waving, like George W. Bush saying, oh, there are weapons of destruction in Iraq. So don't trust this situation at all. Don't trust anything that you hear coming out of DC. Don't trust the narratives and the nice explanations for this, because to date, even though we hold out the possibility that there was some justification for this, there is nothing firm, nothing substantive coming out that explains to us why Donald Trump attacked Iran. And there is absolutely no reason to think that him creating a coalition of other British territorial commercial corporations that have been acting as de facto governments in all these other Arab countries is a good thing, when they're just going to attack the last sovereign nation standing in the Middle East, which it just happens to be Iran. I think, my personal opinion, is that Donald Trump and these other corporate leaders got together and said, hey, we can steal Iran's oil and resources and control the crossroads of the Middle East, and we can go in and we can steal all of their architectural and mathematical and physics and everything. We can steal all their stuff. We can steal their history. We can suppress what we can't steal. And we can play our same old game that we've been playing for the last 300 years. And we can dress it up and make it look like something good and pat ourselves on the shoulders. And we can charge our clients that are paying us to make this attack. And then we can charge our costs off against the American people by pretending that this had something to do with defending them. You see, they're making money hand over fist, both going and coming. And they're telling us this big story about attacking Britain while they're carrying out Britain's orders. It's bullshit. And, there are those of us who are not, obviously, we're not divvying up any words here. We're just flat out saying it's bullshit. And we're saying Donald Trump is a commander-in-chief on the great and bounding high seas. He's not a commander-in-chief here on our land. And he's not acting according to his service contract on obligations to us, the American people. And no, we are not going to pay for their costs in promoting a senseless war in the Middle East. The corporation is going to have to bear those costs, and the principals in back of those corporations are going to have to bear those costs, including all of the destruction of the antiquated, obsolete military bases in all those Middle Eastern countries, because that is a large part of what they were trying to foist off on us. If you look at the situation, they went over and they built all these multi-billion-dollar radar installations and multi-billion-dollar missile systems and whatnot. And in the meantime, the technology had gone so far, so fast, that individual missiles with their own guidance systems, like drone guidance systems, had taken over and rendered all of those installations useless. Now, you've heard about Israel's Iron Dome. This was supposed to intercept any incoming missiles and protect Israel from being attacked by missiles and drones, right? Well, the technology went too fast, and it was utterly unable to do what it was supposed to do. It could not perform as promised and give that kind of protection at all. And so they were stuck with the cost of this very expensive system that was obsolete almost at the time it was built. And so who picks up the paycheck for that? Who's the one who gets stuck for that? Well, they're trying to stick us with it because they've gone in and bombed all those obsolete installations. And so they're going to try to count that as a multi-billion-dollar loss, right? Isn't that just lovely? And they're going to give us the bill for it.
Well, you
And
know,
we're going to tell them to shove it.
I can't help but wonder, Anna, if the whole attack and all this stuff going on in Iran is just an attention grabber to have all eyes on foreign land so that we're not paying attention locally on the theft of land that's being used for these data centers. They're stealing land, they're stealing water resources, all under the noses of innocent people that are trying to stand up, and they're not being heard. They're being ignored, and their natural resources are being stolen right here at home while everyone's talking about Iran. So,
Well,
yeah,
yeah, but no, they're making money off of this, for sure. They're trying to make a lot of money on this, which then gives them the money to do the things that they're doing here. You see, they're on the ropes as far as money goes. Trump is in bankruptcy actually and had to pay it off. So they took this job in the Middle East to pay off, to get out of bankruptcy, right? And now they're counting on being able to charge off the rest of it, the cost of the campaign against us, and give themselves enough money to continue all the other rotten, no good things they're doing.
well, it's a mess because what's happening is our state assemblies are working hard on standing up, is they're left wondering, and I hear this all the time, am I supposed to be standing, am I supposed to be objecting and
Yes,
petitioning and doing what we were doing before status correction?
well, no, you don't have to do it in the same vein at all. You can come in as the state and tell them flat out, no. And that's the county. Have you ever wondered how the Native Americans were able to stop the big pipelines, the oil pipelines and all of that? They were acting as land jurisdiction counties. So, you know, this is how you control what happens in your county. And you can also, if you've got a bunch of council members and people that are just running roughshod, you can run a recall election. We had a situation not too long ago where the people repeatedly told this group of, local council members, commission members, that they didn't want a data center. And the data center people were just pushing it on them and pushing it on them. So they hauled up and they just decided that they would remove all of those commissioners, which they did in prompt order, and got new people in there who would listen. So even at that level, there's a lot you can do, is to target those commissioners and others that are trying to push this crap on people, and just vote them out. That's another valid way to do it.
Well, but if we're not, I know I'm gonna be getting calls about this because you just said it. If we revoked our election to participate in their voting system, then how do we vote them out? What's the strategy for holding them accountable and getting rid of these bad actors?
Just get everybody else all worked up, make them vote.
Well, but here's the rub, right? And we're talking to people about status correction because we have superior concurrent general jurisdiction on our counties. And
Right.
now we're going back on one knee going, help us, we need you to vote them out.
No, we're depending on our neighbors to vote them out.
Okay, so you're saying that the electors in the de facto municipal system have the authority to overturn, recall their people, right? How come we don't have the authority to get rid of those people? By the way, Lisa is doing an open mouth emoji, which usually means that she has something to say. Go ahead, Lisa.
Thanks, Michelle. So, the way we do it on Ohio is we basically hit the social media, sites and we take and kind of add fuel to the fire. So for example, right now on Ohio, they're trying to abolish property taxes. And the next they want to abolish income taxes. And, the property tax people have really put a movement together, grassroots. And I've been feeding them what the law, what it really says, what their constitutional delegated authority was. I've been feeding all of that in the background, right? Giving them ammunition and discussing it and answering questions. I've not brought up, in most cases, state assembly at all. Okay? Occasionally I will mention it, okay? But we go out and we kind of feed that fuel in the background. And then, we try to kind of watch, because ultimately with particularly an issue like property tax, because we have superior concurrent general jurisdiction, when it comes down to abolishing it, if the governor decides he's going to try to veto it, the state assembly can step in and go, that's not your bailiwick, that's ours, and we say abolish it. Okay? And that will bode well when you come out with, we're the state assembly, and we're here to support you in your freedom. Okay? So that's how we handle it. I yield.
Thank you, Lisa. I mean, I imagine that eventually everyone is going to choose a path of freedom and getting rid of these do nothing employees that are actually on the take. Living large and working for various corporations instead of working for the people that put them into those offices. So it might be pie in the sky to think that we will be a majority, a big majority, not that we're a democracy, but that will have staying power and authority in a real world sense, where everyone recognizes that the people of the land and soil have the ultimate say. But in this interim time, I love what you just said, Lisa, because that does help, that we would provide and feed resources and law to help empower those that are like constituents of these elected officials. Because I do see that may be a necessary band-aid while we're in this interim period. As someone who spent approximately 10 years, almost 10 years, doing the quote activism thing, and having legislators promise one thing and do another, and ultimately serve the corporations that had a lot more money, a lot of money. We didn't have money to put in their pockets, but they were receiving money from companies that were, special interest lobbyists, and having these legislators do the bidding of very evil deeds. It's frustrating because it takes a very long time. And in some cases, you don't win. You don't win. And I don't want to dissuade or poo-poo the idea of taking that route. If that's Anna's recommendation, that we do that and partner up and help support activists in these areas. So I don't mean it to sound like that, but it's very discouraging when you have legislators that are just going like, they smile and nod and I hear you, right? And they do this and, oh my gosh, thank you very much. I'll read this. And they didn't read it. They didn't give a damn. They don't care. They care about getting their pockets lined with big dollars and wielding this sort of like arrogant authority over the lives of all the little people. Ultimately, nothing can happen to us without our consent. On a case-by-case, individual basis, we all have the authority to say no to any given thing at any given time. However, when it comes to neighborhoods, communities, cities, towns, It looks like we're gonna have to be partnering up with the activists that are in de facto, who are voters in that system. And that's kind of what I'm hearing in this. That's kind of what I'm hearing right now. It feels like a step backwards, but if that's what we need to do, that's what we need to do. And
So ma'am, Michelle, I don't see it as a step backwards. Because we're gently educating them as to what their rights really are, to exactly how to work with or defeat what they're trying to do. They're voting on their side. We're supporting it on our side. And yes, sort of both ends against the middle. You know, we are going to try to provide as much of that information, because if you get known as a source for the information, then you're going to be the go-to for them. And they're going to accept what you're saying. And when it's time to introduce the assembly, they may accept that easily too. Don't forget that.
I love that. And I hold hope very, very high. I unfortunately have received many more calls of concern, accounts being levied, properties being stolen. And so there's a lot of urgency and timeliness, where I know that our assembly has the power and the authority and the status, standing, and jurisdiction to make the difference. So I know that we're going to get this job done. In the meantime, we have, at least on California, this may not be happening on other states. I'm not sure. The Californians are suffering despite our notices to Marco Rubio, Franchise Tax Board, and others. We're really having a very hard time. And so people are having a challenge. Everyone continues to rebut presumptions, send objections and letters and notices, and people are active. But we're seeing a backwards paradigm bring it as usual.
The important
That's why
thing
it's
that-
important. I was gonna say, Anna, that's why it's important for everybody to get their assemblies up, because one state is nothing without other states. I yield.
Right. This is why we should all be working really hard to get our assemblies populated and getting everybody stood up and get our courts functioning. Okay. This is why, this is our redress. This is how we can actually fight back effectively, is by bringing more and more people together and, becoming a stronger bloc to take action in an organized fashion. Because unfortunately, these liars and thieves got into positions of public trust, and they really don't have any right to be doing what they're doing at all. They're not really public officials of ours. And once that gets stripped away from them, then suddenly you have to have something ready to step into the vacuum that's created. Once we all realize that the emperor has no clothes, there has to be a different system that's ready to take over and to be the right system. And that's what we're building here in tandem. They're still going off and doing their thing over there with their supposed, imaginary franchises. But we're the real people, and we're over here doing something entirely different. And when the day comes, and it's coming fast, within the next 90 days, all these things become public, then we have to be ready to step in and do our part and really perform. And I'm sitting here with this great sense of urgency that we really need to be moving our assemblies forward and getting prepared and having our courts stood up and having our account set up at GFG, having everybody ready to move, because it's coming. It's coming fast. And we are getting ready to serve indictments, international indictments. Okay, so these are major actions that are requiring a lot of time and effort and a lot of thought. But they have to then be enforced, and once they're enforced, we have to have a new system ready to go to have a completely different mode of operations in place so that everything doesn't just spiral out of control. Okay? So folks, what we need to be concentrating on is building up our assemblies, building up our operational capacity, building up our population of people who are already on the land and soil. We need to be building up our courts, we need to be building up our militias, and we need to be building up our knowledge so that we're ready. And we don't have much time left. I know that, when push comes to shove, Americans will always stand together and they'll always stand up. I do know that. But I don't think that many people are ready for the kind of change that's needed and necessary, and which will come one way or another, simply because of the I guess you could call it the nature of things, the nature of human nature and the nature of nature. The old
אני אסיים בזה, אחרת זה יהיה ארוך מדי ואנשים נרדמים. מכריחים אותי כל דבר שקשור עם ישראל לקצר, כי אנשים אין להם סבלנות, אבל מה שחשוב בדבר הזה, שאם אתם רואים, יש מדינות שהן, למשל פלורידה, רק עכשיו התחילו לארגן את האספה שלהם, אספת אסמבלי, לעומת מקומות אחרים שיש להם כבר, יש אזורים אחרים, נדמה לי אריזונה, יש איזה 7, 8, 9, אולי יותר, שכבר פעילים בקטע של האספות, אבל צריכים שכל המדינות, כולם, כמה שיותר יהיו אספות ושיהיו פעילים, והזמן הוא קצר, ואני טוענת גם לישראל, כי אחד הדברים שתדעו, שהייתה תוכנית, ברור שהיא עדיין קיימת, על ידי הישועים, זה חיסול ארצות הברית, לקחת שליטה מוחלטת, חיסולה, וכמובן גם את ישראל. אז עם ישראל הצליחו להטות את הציבור במגפה שקרית והזרקה של ציבור רחב, שזה ממש נגדנו. ולכן גם אנחנו צריכים להזדרז, להיות מוכנים ולארגן את שלנו. אין מה לצאת לבחירה של תאגיד, חובה להודיע בכל מקום, איפה שלא יהיה איזושהי תקשורת, להודיע שלא קיימת ממשלה אמיתית, זו ממשלה שרימתה מקום המדינה, ממשלה שמתחזה כאשר הם מנסים כרגע, סיימנו את העסקה, האדון הנדבן הנחמד, לפני 3 שנים, 3.5, אף אחד לא בא לדרוש, והכל פתוח לכל מי שרק יהיה מוכן לקחת, בשיתוף פעולה עם התאגיד מארצות הברית, כאילו שהם כל אלה שיוזמים את הסדר עולמי החדש. כמובן, כל מה שבנו במהלך מקורונה, בוא נגיד, עד עכשיו, את הסמלים שלהם, את התפיסה ושליטה על נכסים, אם זה בגלל מצב חירום שסגרו אזורים, ואז החליטו שזה לשמור על הטבע, פארקים, או אני לא יודעת מה סגרו. כל הדברים האלה צריכים להיפסק. הם פשוט לא משרתים אותנו, זה חברה זרה, זכיין, מדינת ישראל ממזמן סיימה, ואנחנו צריכים דחוף להתארגן ולעשות את מה שצריך. אוקיי, זה חלק קצר מהדברים שלנו, ושיהיה לכולם שבוע טוב.